Hi everybody, thank you so much for watching this video and welcome to my case study on Cyclistic, the fictional bike share company. Now, everything that you're about to see was done by me, Thomas Torres, in February of 2023 as part of my Capstone project for my Google Data Analytics Professional Certificate. Now, before I go into the actual data itself, I just want to tell you a little bit about me and who I am as a person. Um, Basically, long story short, I'm somebody that has done data analysis throughout my whole life without ever really realizing it or thinking about it. And it was usually one of the better parts of whatever it was I was doing. So I've used it recreationally to track things like character progression and stuff like that in video games to see where I could get the most bang for my buck whenever I'm playing. Um, I've used it personally to track things like finance or diets to better see what areas in life I'm lacking, what areas could be focused on for more improvement, re-budgeting, all that kind of stuff. As well as I've used it professionally in basically all of my careers, whether that be to create and track employee KPIs to see what areas of the business kind of need a little bit more help, or if there's a certain area that is doing particularly good that we can try and see what's driving that success in that area, or just tracking things like daily productivity to see what areas we can streamline and make things a little bit more efficient. Now, for the project itself, the objective was to convert casual riders into members. The stakeholders in this scenario believe that that is the key, the absolute key to long term business success. And what that essentially means is we're going to convert riders who are using daily or single ride passes using the service into people that have the annual membership. So to do this, what I'm going to have to do is see how users use the service differently. Compare that those the metrics that the casual riders have, whether that be duration, distance, start time, that kind of stuff. Compare that to the annual members, and then see how we can incentivize and convert the casual members to the annual members. So a little bit about the company before I go into the actual data. They are again, fictional bike share company based in Chicago with over 6,000 bikes and 600 locations. They have three different bike types within the service, which you can get the classic bike, the e-bike, or the docked bike. And the docked bike is essentially just a more handicap-friendly version of the a bicycle. Now, the three different tiers that you could use to actually use the service are single ride passes, which are basically just a one time use 30-minute trip that costs $3.30. You can go longer than the 30 minutes. However, there will be like an additional charge per minute that you use it. If you want to use it for longer than 30 minutes, however, you could do the day pass, which is $15 a day, which is essentially just unlimited 3 hour ride times in that 24-hour period. So theoretically, you could do 8 3 hour rides within that 24-hour period. The final tier, which is where we want to try and convert the previous two tiers into, is the annual membership. So this is where you're going to be paying $108 upfront and would be renewed annually, which works out to about $9 a month, but you would get unlimited 45-minute rides throughout that calendar year. So essentially, you're paying $9 a month, which is less than just a single day pass and more than or about as much as three single rides, but you get to use the service unlimited within that calendar year. However, the only limitation is that it's 45-minute rides, which we will touch on later because to me, that's an important factor. Now, some some information about the data itself. is that it was provided to us on a first party basis. So what this tells me is that it has a high level of integrity because we don't have to worry about the data being manipulated, lost, altered, anything like that when going in between different parties, whether it's being sold, transferred, moved, whatever the case may be. Sometimes just things happen and a simple character being added to a spreadsheet could completely change it if it's applied to like the entire column, or if there's an entire column that gets missed, entire row section that gets missed, because there are so many data points. It's very vital that this information is as high integrity as possible, and I believe it was because it was done by Divi and the city of Chicago. And Divi is, I believe, the mother company of this fictional company, but it is based on a real life Lyft service. All of this data was made available to us in the data license agreement, which you'll be able to see in the comment section below or on my website, or however it is that you got to this video. That information will be linked somewhere in there. Now, for the data itself, it has the previous 12 months of data from January 2022 until December 2022, which is comprised of approximately 5.6 million data points. Now, just because the data to me has a high level of integrity doesn't mean that it's perfect. The most glaring piece of information to me that's missing is that in the data points it's listed as just casual or member. There's no way to discern whether that casual transaction was either a daily pass or a single ride pass, which is would be a very beneficial, very important piece of information to have. However, we're not able to get it due to some consumer protection laws, and of course customer privacy and stuff like that, especially when it comes to their transaction data, purchase history. That kind of stuff is of the utmost important, and we have to make sure that that's taken care of before anything else. The other thing that we're missing is we don't have access to the distance rode per trip. So we have like the starting GPS coordinates and the end GPS coordinates, but we don't know if that was a ride that was 1 mile or 100 miles. We just don't have access to that, which could give us some insight. It's not as important as the delineation between daily or single use passes, but it would give us some insight into additional riding habits that we just don't have access to right now. And just in general, there were some errors with the data. There were some instances where, like, start station ID and station ID were just flat out missing. Sometimes the start date was flip flopped with the start time. So essentially, it looked like it was the ride started later than it ended, which doesn't make logical sense. Those could be easy to just flip. However, if something in the system caused an error where those were flipped, that makes me question the integrity of the rest of the data points associated with that data. This would normally be something that in a real life scenario, I would ask the stakeholders or whoever it was that is in the chain of command above me to ask, like, hey, do you know what what happened to this data point? Is this something that I could go find in another location? Like maybe there's another spreadsheet where they were manually keeping data when maybe systems were down or something like that, and I could just manually import that. However, I don't have access to that kind of resources, unfortunately, so I opted to just keep the data as it was originally taken. So the data calculations and stuff that come from this might be a little bit off, but I do believe that in general, all of the decisions that I make and all of the outcomes of the calculations are going to be generally correct. Uh, just keep that in mind though. Now, the process that I used is I use SQL and Tableau as my tools of choice. I use SQL for all of the calculations, organizing, importing data, all that kind of stuff. And then Tableau I used for the visualizations. I always struggle with that word. I don't know why. Um, Now, as you can see from the top here, this is where I started. This is what the data looked like as I started it. So there were a bunch of different columns, and some of them I thought weren't that important, but the main one that I really wanted to make sure to point out is that the timestamps that we got for the start and end time, I split that into 5 different categories. So we kept the original like timestamp method, which shows the combined date and time that the transaction either started or ended. But I further extracted that so I could get um, the time, the date, the day, and the month. So what this lets me do is just further inspect if there's patterns within either of those intervals. If there's a specific start time that's busier, if there's a specific day of the week that is busier, if there's a specific month that is slower, all of those kind of things I can do now because I separated that timestamp into more columns. So after I did that and did my cleaning process, this is how the data was converted. So at the top, you can see everything that has this cancel mark is uh is information that I didn't think was very helpful in the long run for this analysis. The transaction ID would be useful if we knew what was tied to those transactions. However, because of the consumer protection laws, of course, we don't have access to that, so it's just not very important. The writable type, which is essentially just a bike type, I originally thought was going to give us some good insight, but the data seemed pretty consistent between both members and casual users. So it didn't provide as much insight as I would have liked, but it was still interesting to look at. Um, the started at and ended at for the ride time, I already went over how I converted that, and we'll see all of that. Those different stamps of data points here. And then the start station name, start station ID, end station names, end station ID, start latitude, start longitude, end latitude, end longitude. I opted to just completely remove because all that tells us is where the ride started and ended. It doesn't tell us anything meaningful about the ride because even though it started at, um, for example, this first one, it started at base 2132 and ended at Kedzian Avenue and 21st Street, that could be a 5 mile distance, but they could have rode in circles for 20 miles and then returned it. And instead of what we see as a 5 mile ride because of the locations and addresses themselves, it's actually a 25 mile ride because of what they did in between the start and end time. So I didn't think it was going to lead to any meaningful insights, so I just opted to completely remove it. The final piece, or I guess second to last final piece of data that is included was the most important, and that was the delineation between whether the transaction was from a membership or a casual. Again, if we could dive into this further, that would be ideal, but we couldn't, so those are the 2 options that we have. And the last thing that I did was I created a duration column, which just subtracts the return timestamp and the start timestamp to create a duration of the ride. This was done in minutes, rounded down. So if we take a look at the first timestamp, it was 0 minutes and 5 seconds. And it was returned at 1 minute and 48 seconds. So the total duration was approximately 1 minute and 43 seconds, which we rounded down to 1 minute. So that's what the actual data itself looks like after the cleaning process. Now we can start looking into some of the charts and see how things actually played out. So when we look at the total amount of rides, they were 5,667,000 rides in the 2022 calendar year. How that broke up was 59% of those were members, and 41% were casuals. Again, we could break this down further. That would be a lot better, but we can't. So all we can really take away from this is that we have more members than we do casual. So it does kind of reinforce the idea that the key to long-term success would be converting those casuals even more into memberships to create a much more solid foundation of our user base. So when we dive into the total rides and kind of break it down on a more in-depth level, we could look at the rides per month. Now, when we do that, we can see the busiest month is July with a total of 823,000 rides in just this month alone. And the slowest month was in January with a total of 103,770 rides. So, what that means, or one of the things that means, is if we take a look at the month per month basis, the colder months perform drastically worse than the hotter months, especially because this is Chicago. If we look at the colder months, which are November, December, January, February, and March, they are all substantially lower than the hotter months, which are May, June, July, August, and September, which are all minimum 500,000 rides per month from May to September. And from December to March, it's at max like 300,000 or almost 300,000 and as low as 103,000. So that got me thinking, okay, what does this look like per season? And when we look into that, the information or the data that we get is a lot more insightful. Of the total 5.6 million rides that we have, nearly 42% come from summer alone. So nearly 42% of our total revenue and stuff comes from those summer months, which are, I believe it was June, July, and August. And between the members and casuals, there's not that much of a difference. It's roughly like 110,000. So they're pretty consistent that just across the board, summer is going to be a lot more traffic than we do in the rest of the year, especially when we compare it to the winter months. Winter months, the members are still riding a decent amount, but the casual riders really drop off. That could be they just don't want to spend the money on additional rides when it's going to be cold out and they're going to have to go in that cold Chicago months or Chicago winter. So maybe we could bump that up if we convert them to the annual membership, which again, we can look at a little bit later and see how that insight works out. But in general, per season, we have a massive spike in traffic in summer months and a massive drop off in winter months for both members and casuals alike. And throughout the year, members ride more than casuals do, just period. So if we dive into that even further and we'll look at on a daily basis, we can see that members typically ride more during the week. They ride more, almost double actually, on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and ride substantially more on Thursday and Friday. On Friday, the gap starts to close until on Saturday and Sunday, when actually more casual riders ride than members. So what that tells me is that since members ride more Monday through Friday, maybe they're using it for work or school or something like that. And casuals who are riding it primarily on weekends are using it more things for fun, for recreation, for hiking, working out, stuff like that, which might be longer activities. So when I looked at that in more in depth, I wanted to see, okay, well, what do those durations look like? Because if they're going to be using it more over the weekend for longer periods of time, what are their average ride look like? So while their average ride isn't like 1 to 2 hours, it is substantially more than the members. It's at least I think double per day. So per day, casuals are just riding it for a lot longer periods than the members are. So, well, I'll give the insight on that at the end because I think that is a very important data point that we need to look at. But the main takeaway from this is that casuals ride a lot longer than members do. So the last thing that I wanted to look at after looking at the duration was if there was a specific time of day. Sorry, I don't know why that went so quickly. If there was a particular time of day where traffic was heaviest. So if we look at it at about 8 a.m. is when the the traffic for members really started to peak. And at about 5 p.m. is when traffic really started to peak for the start times or the return times. So what that tells me is that people are using it for work because they're using it Monday through Friday from like 8 to 5, which coincides with work times, work schedules, school schedules, that kind of thing. It all kind of lines up pretty well. So when we look at them side by side, we have the members who on average ride more during the week, but they have overall shorter ride durations. And between the both of them, they both ride more during the summer months. They both ride less during winter times or winter months. And while the members spike a lot more at 8 and 5 p.m., they have similar start and return times. So the annual benefits are unlimited 45-minute rides. The day passes are unlimited 3-hour rides over a 24-hour period. So since casuals have longer ride duration, it just doesn't seem to me like the annual benefits really line up with what the casual needs are, which are longer rides. Um, what casuals use the service for are for long rides and typically have more traffic during the weekend. So for us to be able to incentivize them and convert them from casual users to members or annual members, we have to make the annual benefits appeal to them. So I have 3 different options on how we could bring that to fruition. The first, which would be to incorporate the benefits of the daily pass into the annual pass and just bump up the benefits that are included. So instead of the annual pass having unlimited 45-minute rides throughout the year, bump it up to have unlimited 3-hour rides or just unlimited rides in general. Now, I think having unlimited rides in general, so you could have it for like 12 hours, things could get a little bit murky because they could just keep it and never return it. So I think having that 3-hour period is a good limit to have. If you don't want to just bump up the annual memberships or you want to build upon that even more, I have 2 additional options which incorporate a tiered system type of business model. The second option would be to have that tiered membership model. So instead of just having annual memberships, we can incorporate annual memberships as well as weekend benefits. So what this would be is it wouldn't be the full $108 billed annually. Instead, it could be something maybe like $75 billed annually, which works out to about $6 a month. So if somebody's using the service for either a single day pass or two to single ride passes per month, this would make a lot more sense for them and incentivize them to get the annual membership, because then they have the annual membership, but the benefits are only active on weekends, which are when casuals use the service more often. So if they could pay less, but still they're paying more than they would on a monthly basis, but less than the annual membership, they're going to see that as a value because they're going to get all of those same benefits on the days that they're looking to use the service, which is on weekends. If we wanted to go a different route, you could create a tiered membership. However, instead of having the annual benefits year round, you'd have it just on the summer months. Or maybe you could do a seasonal period of your choice. So maybe if, maybe if you only live in Chicago during the summer, you could have it during the summer months, or maybe you're going to school in Chicago on fall and spring, but you leave during winter and summer to spend time with family. You could have one of those months, or you could pay for the annual and get them throughout the year. It really just depends on your needs. But as the summer months is the most busy time of year for users that are maybe using the service a lot during the summer months, we could bump them up to this tiered system so that they get the unlimited benefits during the summer when they're using the service the most. Um, Again, the core purpose of this, in my perspective, is to build up the annual user base, even if it is in a tiered system that isn't that full $108 value, because later on, as they experience the service and are satisfied by the service, we can build that community. We can build community events. We could build promotions, all sorts of stuff that we could implement once they're already in the door as an annual membership to get to them to upgrade on the from the weekends or the summers only or the seasonal pass to that full year, and really again build that really solid membership base. Now, this would normally be the part of the presentation where I would ask for questions, ask for feedback, ask if, everything made sense. But again, this was a fictional scenario for a project. So what I'm going to do is open the floor for you guys in the audience. So if there is anything that I could have done differently, if there's something that I missed, if there's something that you guys didn't have questions on or I did wrong, maybe you didn't like the way something looked, maybe you really loved the way something looked and you want to know how I did it. All of the information you can see right over there on how to contact me. You can see my website, my LinkedIn, my GitHub, or you can just shoot me an email, reach out to me with all of your feedback. If you want to leave comments in the comment section on YouTube, I will do my best to answer those as in-depthly and as quickly as possible. But again, I'm new to this. This is my first project from start to finish that I did 100% on my own. And while I'm very proud of this work, I know that there's always room for improvement, and I'm always looking to grow and learn more things, just again to make things easier, nicer, more professional, all that kind of stuff. Now, if you want to go along that process with me and you think I might be a good fit for your company, or if you have test projects that you want me to work on to test my limits and really show you what it is that I have to work with, again, feel free to contact me at any of those avenues mentioned previously, and we can go from there and hopefully build a good relationship. But no matter what, thank you so much for clicking the video. Thank you for watching, especially if you left any feedback. It is greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated, even if it's negative. But I hope you guys have a wonderful day, month, year, and be safe. See ya.